Welcome everyone to my new tutorial on how to stitch 360 panos using a combination of tools such as Lightroom, PTGui, Affinity Photo, and Photoshop. Now I know that the Mavic 3 has just released the latest firmware to create panoramics, which is a great, new addition. We've all been waiting for this. I went ahead and tested this the other day and took some shots, so I thought I would share my stitching process. I prefer not to use the stitching that is done within the app. There's a lot of sometimes issues and I don't get control of how I want to fix the sky if I need to. So I'll go ahead and we'll start with Lightroom and we'll go ahead and process some of the images. Now when you shoot your panos from now on, there is an option to save as raw. So make sure that you have that option enabled, and then it'll create a folder on your SD card, and it's usually in the panoramic folder. So what I've done is taken those out and dropped them on my normal hard drive. And what you'll end up with, if you've done this properly, is 25 DNGs. So what we'll go ahead and do is process those through my Lightroom, like using my process. And then I'll show you how to go ahead and stitch and then edit in Affinity Photo. So go ahead and I'll drag my DNGs that were created from the app when shooting the pano. I'll import those in, and then we'll go to the develop module. I'm not going to talk about how to, do any color balancing or anything like that, but just as a quick thing that you can do or start off with, I will find something more that has the sun related into it. And then for this video, I'll just do auto and maybe adjust a little bit of the highlights. So you end up kind of with a little bit of a change. And then what you want to do is you'll notice at the bottom, you have your one image selected. If you hit, if you select them all while having this main pano and then hit the sync button, it'll synchronize your adjustments across all the images that you've just done. So from this one now has the same values of here and this photo, etc., etc. So again, just edit the photo that you'd like. Make sure then to select all, and I think it's Control A or Windows A, depending on what if you're on Mac or PC, and then sync. So from there, what I'll do is I'll go ahead and export these images out. Now, I like to export everything out as TIFF to keep the highest quality possible. Depending on your hard drive, your computer, the speed of your computer, you might want to choose to do this as a JPEG instead. It'll make it easier in your editing process, and depending on how fast your machine is, you'll have better response time. So I've gone ahead already and exported out the TIFF versions of this. And what this does is it creates a folder called export with TIFF, and then the basic settings, basically what you want to do. So you'll go ahead and hit export on that, and then it'll take a bit of time to do this, and once you've done, you will end up with a folder inside called export, and these will be either the JPEGs that you wanted to do or TIFFs. So in my case, I chose to use TIFFs. They're a little more heavyweight to deal with when you're editing, so you might want to go ahead and try the JPEG version first. So let's go ahead and now jump into PTGui since we're done with this. I'll just remove these from Lightroom for now. So I've been using PTGui for at least 6-7 years, or since it originally came out, to stitch panos, and I find that it's one of the best tools out there that's currently updated and very lightweight and very easy to use. There was another tool called Color, I think, which is no longer used and discontinued. So depending on my issue, sometimes I'll switch to Color depending on how the stitching does. But so far, from what I found on the Mavic 3, that it does a pretty good job of stitching without any adjustments or anything like that. So we'll go ahead and fire up PTGui. I'll go ahead and find my TIFFs. Now again, this is where the slowness is going to happen. So depending on how fast your computer is, it might take a bit to load these into PTGui and then do a proper alignment. So and we'll just kind of go from there. So we'll wait a second. As you can see, the images have been loaded in, and you'll have 25 images out of shooting with the DJI Pano mode. Now this is a little different than the Mavic 2. I believe the Mavic 2 was either 26 or 27, I can't recall. I use a different app to also shoot images, and then I have an additional process that I use to get the rest of the sky, which I can talk about in another video. So as you can see right now, PTGui has loaded in your images, and what you want to do is go ahead and hit Align Images. And it'll go ahead and do its best possible alignment. I find that very complex scenes with lines or roads sometimes do not align properly with the DJI app, whatever they're using to stitch internally. So this is the best method that I prefer. If you want to go ahead and inspect your Pano a little bit more, there's this little magnifying icon, which will load up your Pano in much more of a high resolution mode. And you can go ahead and just look around. For landscapes, I tend to look at the mountains to make sure that they're properly stitched. If there are any roads around, I'll look at those and see. And then there's a process that you can do to add control points, but that's more of an advanced topic that I won't go over. So once you feel comfortable with having your Pano the way you have it, what you can do is export it from there. So you'll notice that the top fourth is missing. This is due to the limitation of the camera being able to point up higher. I think on the Mavic 2 it's 30, and maybe the Mavic 3 is 30 or 35. It doesn't matter, but what happens is you end up missing quite a bit of the sky. So what you can do, and I can go over this in another tutorial, but I'll briefly mention this. After you've taken your Pano, land your drone, and then pick up your drone and hold it at about 60 degrees angle and take a photo from the north, the east, south, and the west, all at 60 degrees, and then take one final image pointing directly up. With that, you get 5 additional images, which you can drag into PTGui, and it will get majority of the sky that's missing. So as you can see right now, we have a great sky with a lot of cool clouds. So if you go ahead and blend this, which the DJI app does, it looks like crap. I'll show you exactly kind of what that would look like here. So you have the option to blend this in PTGui as well. A blue sky, a pure blue sky, is not going to really look too bad, but right now it's going to be all fuzzy and just not look very great. So there is another alternative, which I'll go over into the next step, to potentially fix some of these issues. But again, I highly recommend taking those additional shots when you're on the ground. That will make your panos look so much better. So for this case, I'm not going to fill the holes. I usually use exposure fusion, and then I'll optimize the HDR values just a little bit. I won't go specifically the reason for that. You can play around with whatever you like, and if you have PTGui, I recommend that you go through their tutorials. So the last step we have now is basically to export the Pano. So by default, the file format will be JPEG. And what I tend to do is, as I exported out TIFFs, I want to continue to save TIFFs as the format. I want the highest resolution possible, so when I'm editing or downsizing into a JPEG or some other format, I'm using the master file. So again, this will lead to a very big file, and depending on your computer, let's see, where did that go? 56. You'll end up with about a 2 gig file, anywhere from 2 to 3 gigs. If you have those additional 5 shots, it'll be close to 2 gigs. And if you export out as the JPEG at 100% quality, it's about 200 megs plus. So any of your editing software, you have to take into account the amount of RAM you have on your computer and how slow it is. So for now, if you want to play around, I would recommend using the JPEG version. So basically select JPEG and then select quality and change that to 100. If you want to go ahead and do TIFF, select TIFF, and there's a few settings that you want to make sure you change. So clicking on this allows you to change this back to 16-bit, and then you want to set the compression to none, and then hit OK, and then create your panorama. So I've already gone and done this. It can take a minute or two or a couple minutes depending on the speed of your computer and if you have a GPU to help do this. So what I ended up with, again, is 2 files, the JPEG and then the TIFF version. For this demonstration of editing, I'll go ahead and use the JPEG version because my machine is a little slow. My other machine is being used to do some photogrammetry right now, so it's my faster machine. But you know, it'll get the point across. So we're done. Once you've created your panorama by clicking here and it's done, you can exit out of PTGui, and then you'll go ahead and you'll end up with something that looks like this, which, you know, as you can see, it's missing the sky, you know, and we didn't use the blend mode. But you know what, there's a pretty decent tool that I've been using for a long time. It's called Affinity Photo. I'll go ahead and load that up right now. It's a cheaper alternative to Photoshop, and you don't have to pay a monthly fee. And not only that, but Photoshop has recently mentioned that they will be removing 3D Pano support. And on top of that, their 16-bit editing for panos was just, you know, didn't work for some reason. So Affinity Photo, you know, is a good way to edit your 16-bit panos if you're doing it in the TIFF format. Easily remove things like tripods or blemishes or whatever. So we'll go ahead and load the JPEG up. All right, right now we're in Affinity Photo, and the ways that you edit these panos is going to Layer, Live Projection, Equirectangular Projection. I don't know if anybody could say that easily. If you click on that, it'll go ahead and take a minute and then put you into, you know, what you would see in a 360 pano, which, you know, doesn't look too bad. It's pretty nice. But oh my god, we have this big black thing in the sky, and you know, our clouds are moving in here. If you had a blue sky, it's easier to just maybe use PTGui to do the blend mode on that. But let's go ahead and see how we can get some of the sky back. Again, if you'd landed your drone prior at the end and shot 5 additional photos, you'd probably have this gap filled in and it looked really great. So we'll go ahead and get to right around the top, and you can change the field of view so you can get this piece all the way in. And then what I tend to do is I'll use the wand, or I think they call it the fill tool, flood select on this, and it'll go ahead and select that area. You can also, you know, polygon select around it. Then what I'll do is I'll go to the selection, grow and shrink, and I'll raise this up a little bit to grow it. Hit apply. Now you can fill this with the paint bucket and then use in painting option, or you can, just so you know where in painting option, I'll show you this here. You go here, click the in painting brush tool, and then you can hit the bracket keys on your keyboard to go up or down on this. So go ahead and get this, and then you just paint in this section, and then depending, you let go and you give it a second and see what the results are. Now you can see the results of the in painting tool, and I have to say it did a pretty good job. This would be a lot of work to do cloning and use other processes to get this. So what we want to do next is we'll go ahead and deselect this layer, or the selection I should say. And then what I tend to do sometimes is I'll look around certain areas, like to see how it was blended or fix things. So to go ahead and edit your move around in your Pano again, you have to select this move tool and then hit edit live projection. And then depending on your computer speed or how big your file is, it'll take a second to get back into the mode where you can edit. So we're going to go ahead, and you can see once you're in this mode, you have the little ability to move around. And basically it's a rinse and repeat process. So as I can see right here, you know, it didn't blend it very well, but for most things that would be okay. You know, it just depends. I mean, you pretty much filled in a big hole, which, you know, is great. So you don't have that blurry kind of version. So, you know, sometimes I'll go ahead and I'll zoom in on this and then maybe click the in painting tool and go ahead and just kind of massage these little pieces together. You know, you don't really have to do this. It's just kind of up to you. But, you know, sometimes it works great, sometimes it doesn't. So, but we'll go ahead and then always, once you've editing something in this mode with any sort of tool, to get back into moving your Pano around, you have to click the move tool and then the edit live projection button up at the top. So normally what I've done when I do my ground Panos, I use Affinity Photo, and then I end up easily removing the tripod using this in painting thing. So it's very handy, and this program is well worth the money. I think I got it on sale for $25. It's usually like 40 or 50. So so for example, this little looks like a little airplane going across the sky. You can easily go to the in painting tool, select it, resize it with the bracket keys, just paint it out, and you're done. So once you've made all your edits and you are ready to export this out, one thing that has caught a lot of people is they want to go ahead and do file export from here. And since you're still in the Pano mode, it will just export what you're seeing on the screen. So you have to go back to Layer, Live Projection, Remove Projection. Now trust me, you'll probably run into this a few times. You'll go to edit your photo that you just saved and you're like, oh, that's not the yes, the 360 version of that. So it'll pan back out. So compared to what we originally had, where it was black and everything like that, I think this did a good job. You know, and it's pretty close to what you would do if you had taken those extra images. So I'll go ahead and then export this out. So, you know, we are using the JPEG, so you can go ahead and export the JPEG out. But if you're using the TIFF workflow, one thing I want to point out is that when you use their 16-bit TIFF preset, it is, and you click more to get the settings, they are using compression for this. So I tried to, throughout my whole workflow, from saving from Lightroom, saving from PTGui, and saving from Affinity Photo, to always keep it with no compression. So you can do manage preset, and I created one called TIFF uncompressed, which then you can see the compression has none. and it's 16-bit. Just a little tip there. So you can go ahead and export that out, and then you'll end up with a TIFF file anywhere from 1.5 to 2 gigs, depending on how big your site, how big the Pano was. So I'll go ahead and cancel it out. I've already done this. I'll go ahead and exit out of this as well. Oh, actually, let me save this. I'm not quite sure if I've saved this. So I'll export this out. So JPEG, highest quality, export into the right folder. Where is it? I'll just do it here. So I call this no sky just so you know I knew it was missing a fourth of the sky. So we'll go ahead and save that out for a second. All right, so we're done with Affinity Photo. Now, I do want to point out though, you can use Affinity Photo to do all your edits as well. You know, and I think it's worth learning. So if you are stuck in the Adobe kind of subscription process and you're only really using Lightroom or Photoshop, it's best to kind of learn this tool too, because then you can go ahead, do your color corrections in the development module and such. But to show you the Photoshop process of like how I end up finishing things, I'll go ahead and do that now. So we're done with this. And now we have our file. So about 234 megs. Your TIFF file will be anywhere from 1.5 to 2 gigs. Like I said before, and that's my preferred workflow, but just for this video I'm showing the JPEG process for just faster editing. So I'll go ahead and edit this with Photoshop. All right, so from here you can go ahead and do additional edits if you want. You know, a lot of people like to go back into Camera Raw and, you know, start with auto a lot. I don't really tend to do this, but I'll just show you a process. You can also notice where the blue is right here is where the blacks are peaking over here on this side. But let's go ahead and like brighten this up a little bit. All right, so you can press this, hold this down with the mouse button to see the before and after. And then you can go ahead and make your various changes if you want. And I'll just go ahead and, you know, not really do any changes mainly, but just to show you kind of the process. And then from here, you can save out your changes, or like most of us will want to go ahead and post to Facebook. Now, posting to Facebook, I've found that it has some quirks sometimes, and people tend to get not sure like why it's not working. So what I've found is I will down-res this main Pano, and then I'll save it as a JPEG, but I will try to keep the file size under 30 megs. Sometimes I feel like I'm at 30 or 31, and when I go to save it and save my post, it saves it in this mode instead of the 360 mode. And when you're using PTGui, for the most part, I want to show you that it does save the proper EXFI data into your file. So if you go to File Info, you'll notice that it says the Pano kind of modes right here. So we'll show you everything that needs that not Photoshop, but Facebook needs, and any other maybe app that you're going to upload to. So that's good. So don't have to worry too much about that. Now, if you do happen to lose that, there is a small app you can download called EXIF Fixer, and you simply drag your image onto that app and it'll resave it out with that appropriate data. So But let's go ahead and then go through my process. So what I'll do is I'll take it from this down to anywhere from 1100, 11,000 to either 10,000. So let's just do 10,000. This will make a smaller file for us. And it'll convert it from the resolution of 300 dpi down to 72. So we have that. Now, one bonus tip I do sometimes is when I downres that low, I will run it through Topaz Denoise. I think it's a great tool to fix up anything that is kind of like pixelated or blurry. You don't really see it here, but you know, depending on like how close or how far zoomed in. So this is additional software. This isn't a required step, but I find it's kind of nice to do. Now, I'm not going to go over how to use this, but I keep my everything as low as possible because I'm coming from a very high resolution image. So trying to see if I can find a spot where you can see. On the left-hand side, it might be hard to see in the video compression. You can see that there is, it's a little pixelated. So when I let go, you can see it's much clearer and smooth here, where you can kind of see some pixelation here. It's kind of hard to see unless you're looking at it like right up here too in this area. So, but I'll go ahead and apply that at very low like changes just to kind of smooth everything out. You don't want to go too crazy. It's going to just blur your image. Your water might not look like water anymore, you know, and kind of go from there. So this is just a little bonus. It's not required, but it's handy. And it's kind of handy for any of the photos that you're doing. It doesn't have to be a 360 Pano, and depending on like the resolution that you have. So from here, I will go out and I will save this as a JPEG, and I'll usually put just web and go ahead JPEG, and then depending on this value, I want to make sure that I'm under 30 meg. So the 11 should be good at 10,000 by 500 or 5,000. So yeah, so we got 25 megs. Now, what you can do from here is I can go ahead and show you how I post to Facebook. So I'll go ahead and start a new photo. So if you're not 100% sure if your image is going to work, sometimes I'll do only me, and I'll do testing, and then I will drag this No Sky Web on to my account. Now you'll notice it shows as a 360, and then what I like to do is click the edit button and then find the kind of point or interest that I like to start out. Now you'll notice that there is no save yet, and basically it's still uploading your photo, and once it hits save, you're good to go. If you never see this, this is where your image is too many megabytes. So try to keep it at 30 or under 30. So I'll go ahead and save that, and then I will post it. And then we can go ahead and to see the pano that I just created. Doesn't look too bad for a filled in sky. So there you go. And then once you're comfortable, you can go ahead and delete this post and then post it as a normal, not just for you. These are just some tips. So I hope you liked the tutorial. Leave some comments down below. You know, I'm new to doing this, and I hope this kind of sparks some ideas. If you have some other thoughts or comments or suggestions on these workflows, please let me know. Have a great day and enjoy using your Mavic 3 in Pano mode.